Is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The president was in Belvidere, Illinois. The newly reopened Stellantis plant, part of the UAW's agreement with Stellantis, bringing jobs back to America, touting the fact that, you know what, Americans work harder than anybody and just want a fair shot. Seems fairly reasonable, but all our mainstream corporate-controlled media could report on is that there was a loud noise in the background, and the president wanted the press to know that it wasn't him falling. And that's what they grabbed onto. That's the story. Biden didn't fall. Did you know Biden's old? Yeah, that's what you're supposed to think when you hear that. Biden's old. And he is. And I admit that. But here's what I love about the guy. It's about the jobs, man. It's about giving workers an opportunity to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. He was in Belvidere, Illinois, lobbying for, the UAW's endorsement, because guess what? Gonna need it. And I think earned it. And this is one of those days where I had a really good day today because, I had a very long conversation with a Trumpy. And, not a crazy Trumpy, but still someone who had all the talking points, had all the things in line, ready to but. And I'm going, look, I don't care about all of the red hat, blue hat stuff. I've never cared about that. I don't get into the team sport stuff. What I care about is this guy is in the House of Labor. This guy is 100% behind working people. And happened to be a Teamster I was talking to. I said, every Teamster in this country should be voting for Joe Biden because he saved their pensions. He saved multi-employer pension funds in this country, something Trump refused to do, had 4 years to do, didn't. And this is one of those moments where you go thing after thing, checking off the box, helping working people. And, I had to go through this long history of understand how we got to this point. And we got to this point because for decades, corporate America and the very wealthy have had their way. Whatever they've wanted, they've gotten. Tax breaks, deregulation, crushing unions, not increasing the minimum wage. Go down the list of all of the things, passing no rights at work laws, destroying unemployment benefits, destroying workers' compensation, all of what built the most prosperous, strongest working class in history. Republicans and corporate Democrats have been attacking. And I said, look, for me, it's not about red hat, blue hat. It's about hard hat. It's about making sure that what we work for, what we earn, we get compensated for. And I said, I don't care about Joe Biden being able to deliver a speech, and he gave a great one today from Belvidere, Illinois. But I think about the people that he put into place. And you think of the head of the NLRB, the general counsel there, that Jennifer Abruzzo. I don't know what else to say. If you're a labor person, that's all that should be said. But sadly, most people don't know who she is. She is fundamentally changing decades of attacks on workers by returning the NLRB to an advocate for working people, making sure that the NLRA works for working people. And I know, look, it's outdated. It needs to be revamped in major ways, and we need to really have comprehensive major labor law reform in this country. But these are people who are trying. Unlike the previous administration, unlike the Trump years, where it was all attack. Look at Labor Secretary. I love Julie Su. She was, in California, someone who was standing up for working people there. Compare that to Trump's, labor secretary choices. Andy Puzder, Carl's Jr. CEO, who wanted to automate everything and put people out of work, said, if you want to raise the minimum wage, we'll just automate you out of a job. That would be their labor secretary. Antonin Scalia's son, Eugene, that's who Trump chose. Now, if you're a working person, Just looking at that, how can you possibly even consider the Orange Menace? How can you possibly consider Trump in that vein? And then there's all of the other things that have come out of this administration, the infrastructure bill. We just, the other day, what was it, $16.8 billion in Amtrak investments, maybe going to pull Amtrak into, I don't know, the 20th, maybe close to the 21st century, so that maybe we can catch up to the rest of the world. I got to tell you, personally, I want to be ahead of the rest of the world. We as a country used to push the bounds of technological advancement. We used to be the country that everyone envied infrastructure-wise or investment-wise. We used to be the country that dreamed big. I grew up believing we were going to be the Jetsons. And sadly, the Jetsons are what you see when you go to China. We're still the Flintstones. Because if you fly into LAX coming out of Beijing, it's like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. Because we haven't made the investments. And why? Well, because we got to give tax cuts to rich people. We've created a glutton class at the very top who have been more than happy to line their own pockets at the expense of you and me and everybody else. So am I surprised that our media reports Joe Biden didn't fall down today? No. Never mind the fact that because of the UAW victory, jobs are coming back to Belvedere, Illinois. Stellantis is going to start making vehicles there again. And maybe the Jeep Patriot I loved so much, maybe that will be made in the U.S. again instead of that Renegade they made in Mexico. That is good stuff. And look, Democrats are finally getting their heads where it needs to be. Finally, the Senate is holding hearings on, how do we hold corporate America in check? Look, Bob Casey just came out with this study, and we've all known what the study said. He's just backed it up with numbers and actual facts. But we've known corporate America has been screwing us over. Corporate America has been deep in our pockets, robbing us blind. Calls it greedflation. We've heard this before. I've said it before 1,000 times. But now you've actually got the numbers. 14% in inflation after the pandemic. 75% corporate profits went up. Do you think they're correlated? Do you think that they have something to do with each other? And I had this conversation with my Trump friend who, because we started off by talking about cars. He likes my Jeep. I liked his Chevy pickup truck. A lot of money for it. And we were talking about, he was saying, I was going to buy a used one. And he was going through this whole story about how the person that he was going to buy it from had bought it, a month earlier for $5,000 cheaper. And he was just trying, because the used car market was, just insane. And he was just trying to line his pocket. And I said, did Joe Biden do that? This is how inflation happens. Everybody's got their greed tenants on. And I got a bunch of emails on this yesterday when I talked about it. I said, we've always been greedy. What stopped it before? What stopped it before is there was competition. There was always something else. We didn't have a stuck supply chain. And oh, by the way, we didn't have a convenient excuse. We just can't get stuff. It's quite remarkable. But the Senate is going to have the Senate Help Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. They're going to have a hearing next week, standing up against corporate greed, how unions and improving the lives of working families. And look, this is important. This is an important topic. Because I've said for a very long time, you want to hold corporate America in check? Unionize. You want to bring this country back together? You reunite them? Unionize. You want to do a lot of the good things that we haven't been able to do? You kind of get the drift, right? We got to come back together. And this is one of these hearings that won't get reported on. There'll be a couple people who are going to speak. I know Sean Fain, the UAW president's going to be there. Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters president, and my good friend Sarah Nelson, the international president for the flight attendants union. She's going to be there. And look, we all know this. We know the only answer to corporate greed is organized workers, is people who they have to sit across the table from and negotiate with. You know why the UAW did so well? Because when you told the American people that over the last couple of years, the CEOs of those companies pocketed $1 billion in salaries, and that the companies had profited $250 billion over the last decade, people were going, that's not right. And you've got workers working at just above poverty levels to make those kind of obscene profits. And I know everyone's saying, well, you're going to put the companies in trouble. Yeah, and we know what happens when the companies get in trouble. We've seen it across every industry, every employer, every time. They always go back to the workers and go, up, got to tighten the belt. And workers do. And this is kind of learned behavior for corporate America. They get it. They know they can run the car into the ditch, and we working people will pull it out of the ditch. And we will sacrifice, and we will struggle, and we will sweat and bleed just to keep it going, to get it back on its wheels and moving forward, just so they can crash it again. I got to tell you, we're in one of these moments where decisions are important. And look, I'm not always the great champion for Democrats, but right now they're doing good things. For instance, and this is something I've been calling for a very long time, California Congressman Mark Tanco, New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew, Republican, Democrat turned Republican, so I'm not really sure. Ed Markey, the Democratic senator from Massachusetts, and Democratic Senator Alex Padilla from California. They have introduced, or I guess they're introducing, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. They're going to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 to include truckers to receive hourly compensation. I think this is a game changer. I think this is important, because you're not going to have people running themselves ragged. You're not going to have companies abusing their time. You ask truck drivers, what's the one of their biggest pet peeves? And it's, going to a facility and waiting for hours and hours to get loaded. Waiting for hours and hours to get the next load. Waiting for hours and hours for equipment or whatever. Now you put the onus on the employer to use their people more efficiently, and I guarantee you things are going to run a lot smoother. And you know what? That imaginary trucker shortage that they claim we have, it kind of goes away because you're utilizing your resources a whole lot better. Seems like good business to me, but we'll see how the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act does in the Republican-led House. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the ratings for the big debate, not great. Not great at all. In fact, the worst that they've probably ever been. Literally nobody paying attention. Let's go to the phone. We got Steve on line one. Steve, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine. And on that point, it's sort of like the Olympics. When we have these team sports, the Olympics are sort of this strange phenomenon in which you'll get that team that's competing with another team for the bronze medal. So the gold and silver medal that's being played, but this is but then there's that bronze medal match And that's what you saw last night. I mean, at some point, the country realizes that, and barring something crazy, Donald Trump's their nominee again.
Yeah.
And so, it's just a question of, okay, who are these handful of idiots who are still swiping at each other, who don't have the guts to actually attack the lunatic who was president of their party last time and is running again? I mean, I would just like one of them to stand up there with some guts and say something substantive about Donald Trump being corrupt, Donald Trump having been a terrible Republican, a terrible president, a terrible human being for this country, and bad for their party. But no, it's okay. If Donald Trump or if a convicted felon is the nominee, how many of you will support that person? Well, virtually everybody's hand goes up,
except Chris Christie.
So I mean, yeah, exactly. Except Chris Christie. I mean, there are people who Donald Trump, we know now, given what the New York Times and other publications have told us, Donald Trump has a hit list, enemies list, basically like Richard Nixon had.
Yep.
This is his plan on day one. These are the following people who I plan to get after I pardon myself and everybody else, in terms of who's going to pay for not supporting me in my hour of need.
It's the retribution tour. You know it. You know it is. This is a guy who holds grudges. You think he's going to have some power and not use it? Of course he is.
Absolutely. I mean, just the level of insanity and the idea that this guy can actually have a shot in 2024 is frightening. And as you pointed out, Democrats have to be better about their messaging. You're absolutely right. With regard to truckers and other people, social media is one of those things where I don't like it very much. I don't find it much substance there, but people can. I've had people send me videos and so forth because truckers have recorded themselves on the radio with their dispatchers and are telling them, look, I need you to push on and get that load through or whatever. The guy's like, look, I need to stop and sleep. I haven't slept in 18 hours. Guy's like, hey, look, I don't care what you got to do. Coffee up, do whatever you got to do, which is code for take whatever you got to take. Yep. To stay awake to get that load there, because yes, there are regulations with regard to how long they can be on the road, but that starts when they get the load. And as you said, you're sitting there 3-4 hours waiting to get loaded up. You're not sleeping, so that means you could be on the road without being sleep deprived for a long, long time, and they're still pushing you to get that through. And again, we need those kinds of protections, and you and I are old enough to remember when. Walmart and Target and the big box stores put Main Street out of business in this country. And then, sort of poetic justice now, Amazon is putting them out of business. Targets and Walmarts are closing around the country because they don't have the kind of following they had 10, 15, 20 years ago when they were these giant mega stores and they thought no one could put them out of business. Well, who could put you out of business? The person who doesn't have any overhead because they don't pay any local taxes and they don't have to buy a giant facility in the neighborhoods. No, yeah, they just ship straight to everybody.
Yep, and they got every state in the country giving them their data and doing their work, on the hopes of maybe they'll get a headquarters like they did. Yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely. Because when we were younger, so the mom and pop hardware store. Okay, the family had a business there. Their kids worked there. They had a handful of other employees. The guy in the plumbing shop, electrical shop, the paint guy. Okay, those people all supported their families. When you put in an Amazon or a warehouse, or when you have the Walmart or Target superstore, those people were making bare minimum. As a matter of fact, with Walmart, if you went in, they literally in many communities gave you the paperwork to help you apply for federal aid and state aids because you didn't make enough money working for Walmart. So okay, let the taxpayers of this country subsidize your needs because we're not going to pay you enough. So great, the American taxpayer can help Walmart become the Walton family become even more wealthy. I mean, that's what we've come to in America. And the trade-off was always that, okay, they're automating a lot of American jobs. They're offshoring other jobs because everything that you were buying in a Walmart was made in China. And the trade-off was, okay, well, you're getting the $3 T-shirt, so hey, shut up and don't complain. And people love their Walmart. But if they did a little bit of thinking, at what cost were they getting those
exactly.
low prices?
Exactly.
And that was the problem. And we need again, as you pointed out, we have not been at the cutting edge of technology and innovation in a long time, and we need to get back there. We need to invest. Things don't just magically happen. Empires and countries come and go. There are ebbs and flows, and this idea that what was good for GM was good for America. Yes, there was a time when GM was the largest corporation in the world. That's no longer the case. Why? Because we got lazy. We got greedy. I mean, I have a lot of respect for a lot of people in the American automobile industry, but there's a reason why you go to the suburbs, and affluent suburbs are full of German cars, and middle-class suburbs are full of Japanese cars and Korean cars. And the reality is that those companies innovated. They knew how to make things that ran and were reliable. And Americans, we were not very innovative. We didn't make very reliable cars, and we paid the price as a result. And that came from greed. It didn't come out of American workers who weren't doing a good job on the line. It came out of people who were saying, you know what, substitute cheap parts for good parts. Don't innovate. Don't hire good designers. Don't stay ahead of the game. You know, I mean, we were building gas-guzzling nonsense in the 70s when the oil crisis was going on, and that's when Japan and Germany came and said, hey, you know what, we drive small, fuel-efficient cars. Maybe it's time you guys caught this little trend that's going on.
Nope. You're spot on, Steve. As always, appreciate the call, man. Thanks so much. Let's go to Alice on line 2. Alice, how are you this fine day? I know, insane, right?
No, semi-coherent.
All right, hit me.
So, have you seen or have you heard about the Washington Post? Apparently, I gather from reading the comments in the story I'm about to bring up, that apparently the Washington Post has hired a former Fox News executive. So now they're printing stories like today's, the untold story of a brief FBI inquiry into Biden's golf club membership.
I saw that too, and I said, does Biden play golf? That was my first thought. I didn't know if the guy played golf.
Well, and then you read looking, and it says 2001, and I thought, my God, you people are desperate to come up with something that even looks a little bit. It's just insane.
I'm with you.
And I was reading the comments, and apparently you are not the only ones thinking the same thing. Everyone was going, oh, gee, you're really reaching some to go back to 2001 to find something that nothing was found about.
Yep, you got to find something, Alice. Appreciate the call. Thanks so much. Let's go to Bob on line 3 real quick to get the final thoughts. Bob, how are you, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. I want to describe an experience I had. I worked not in the industry of driving, but maintaining radio and television transmitters. I worked all night, and at 9:30 in the morning, I left San Francisco's Sutro Tower, and I remember getting on the north end of Highway 280, and about 20 minutes later, I realized I was on an off-ramp in Redwood City. I had driven about 25, 30 miles on autopilot.
Yep, I've done it.
That scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And my understanding is if you're sleep deprived and if you're not on the clock until you have a load, you could end up being like that. Look at almost an accident looking for a place to happen. But it's one thing if it's a car, it's another thing with a truck with 80,000 pounds of stuff.
Absolutely. Bob, I appreciate the thoughts, man. Good stuff. Thanks so much. Got to take a quick break right here. Right back after this. Stick around. Look, I've been there. It's scary stuff. I agree with Bob 100%. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day members of the industrial workers of the world began a free speech fight in Spokane, Washington. Wobblies often intersected seasonal workers through street corner soapboxing. Many towns and cities worked to resist IWW organizing efforts by passing ordinances against such rallies. Wobblies challenged these repressive tactics. They would descend on a town or city in great numbers, forcing mass arrests that overwhelmed local authorities and judicial systems. At Spokane, the organizing campaign began a year earlier. Wobblies mobilized against local employment agencies that charged workers fees for jobs that didn't exist. The campaign was so popular that the IWW was able to establish a union hall, hold meetings and lectures, and establish a newspaper. The Spokane City Council quickly passed an ordinance against street corner rallies. When Wobblies learned that religious groups were exempt from the restrictive ordinance, they announced November 2nd as Free Speech Day in Spokane. They put out the call, wanted men to fill the jails of Spokane. By the end of the month, as many as 500 had been arrested. The War Department even offered up nearby Fort Wright to handle the glut of prisoners. A young Elizabeth Gurley Flynn arrived in Spokane to soapbox. Efforts to arrest her were briefly frustrated after she chained herself to a nearby lamppost. Flynn made good use of her time in jail. She reported on appalling prison conditions and accused the local sheriff of operating a brothel out of the women's prison section. The free speech fight gained nationwide attention and enjoyed wide public support. By March, all prisoners were released, the ordinance had been rescinded, and employment agencies' license revoked. The IWW won big.
Hear it? What's that sound? Ooh, it's Washington's revolving door, allowing corporate interests to come directly inside Congress to pervert public policy. That door is now spinning fast because there's a new boss operator in Congress. He's Mike Johnson, who was recently unanimously chosen by Republicans to be their Speaker of the House. He's a corporate wet dream, an affable ultra-conservative from Shreveport who consistently backs the plutocratic agenda of big business over workers, the poor, consumers, and most other Americans. Moreover, Johnson maintains it was God who elevated him to his new position of authority, and that the Bible will guide his policy views. Well, selected parts of the Bible. Don't expect much mercy, justice, and peacemaking from this hardcore laissez-faire ideologue. For example, guess who he's chosen to be his director of policy? Big Pharma's top Washington lobbyist. Dan Ziegler has been the chief influence peddler for a dozen multi-billion-dollar drug giants, including Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer. Ziegler has furiously opposed every legislative effort to stop the rampant price gouging, even though 90% of Americans are clamoring for Congress to clamp down on pharmaceutical ripoffs. But we 90%ers don't control the revolving door. Mike does. Johnson piously cloaks himself in both the Christian gospel and libertarian myth of free markets, yet he has consistently pushed government action to restrict competition and protect drug monopolies. Now, in his first substantive action as Speaker, he is literally bringing Big Pharma inside to sit with him in the seat of legislative power. This is Jim Hightower saying drug pricing reform will soon come up for a vote in Congress. Before Mike's lobbyist buddy tells him what to do, let's demand that he reread the Sermon on the Mount.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the debate numbers, I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit, but the debate numbers not good. First debate over on the F channel, back late August, you had 12.8 million total viewers, 2.8 in that coveted 25 to 54 demographic, of which I am no longer part of. And then you had the second debate on Fox Business. It had a drop from 12.8 down to 9.3, but only 1.8 million in the coveted demographic of 25 to 54. Well, the big debate the other day, over on NBC, 6.8 million people and 1.3 in the coveted 25 to 54. Nobody's watching. I mean, think about it. Think about how sad this is. In a country of over 350, probably 360 million people, 6.8 watched the presidential debate, the Republican presidential debate. Think about that for a minute. Nobody cares. Here to talk a little bit about, well, what's going on. And maybe my next guest was one of the, what was it, 1.3 million of the coveted 25 to 54 age demographic. So I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website if you want to take a look at her work. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
I totally didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it?
I know that my mother kind of flipped through and watched a little bit of it, and then she turned it off. But she's over 60. But you know, I ended up watching Wheel of Time on Prime. So, like, nope.
Bad.
I mean, I could tell you basically how it's going to go is, Vivek Ramaswamy is going to, battle Nikki Haley, and she's going to attack him, and he's going to attack her, and then somebody was going to make fun of Ron DeSantis' boots, and then Charlie Chris Christie is going to attack Donald Trump. I mean, like, that's, and Tim Scott isn't going to really say anything, and nobody's going to remember he's there.
But he's got a girlfriend now.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that maybe she was there before, but now I think once people started questioning, whether he was a little bit.
So does he got himself a beard? Is this what this is? Got himself a beard?
I don't know. I don't get that from him. I don't get the vibe from him.
Not like Lindsey Graham.
Right. Definitely Lindsey Graham. And I feel like Lindsey Graham would be flirting with Tim Scott a lot. But he just doesn't. I don't get that vibe off of him. He doesn't alert the door.
So you're of the same mindset that I am, that whatever that was, nobody paid attention to, and none of them are going to be the nominee. It's probably going to be Trump, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is we all kind of know it's going to be Trump. Even if, he's put in jail, he's still probably going to run for office, and he's still probably going to get like 49% of the vote. So,
and look, hey, Joe Manchin's freed himself up to run for president. He announced today not going to run for re-election. Not like he was going to win. This was not a shocker to anyone paying attention. He was definitely going to lose. So I got to tell you, I think to save face, he bailed. But the story here now is he's now, for the good of the country, he's going to travel around the country and mobilize the middle and bring America together.
That's so much crap. I mean, the whole reason that he said that he was not going to run again was because he wanted to spend more time with his family, and he has 10 grandchildren, and he really doesn't get to spend a lot of time with them. So instead, he's going to travel the country and decide whether or not he wants to run for president. And you're just like, you are so full of it. Like, don't even try.
Maybe he could team up with Jill Stein, because evidently Jill Stein is running. I wish she would run away, but she's announced she's going to be the Green Party again.
But the thing is the grifters are going to grift, right? If Joe Manchin was smart, he would switch parties and run as a Republican, because he may actually get enough decent votes to be higher than Ron DeSantis, which is really saying something.
Probably any of the children's table, he'd probably do better than. He couldn't do any worse, right?
Plus, he's taller than Ron DeSantis, which would be hilarious on the debate stage.
Even with his boots on, even with the high heels.
Yeah, even with the heels.
So what do you think? I mean, so we both agree Trump's going to be the nominee. Does he pick Tucker Carlson to be the VP? Is this where we're going? And hold on, I got one more thing. And does Tucker Carlson's testicles have to be the same color as Trump's face? Because if you remember, I guess I got to explain this. Guess I got to explain it, because if you remember, he did that whole tanning your testicle thing to get the to get the testosterone up, so you go out and burn the boys in the sun. Right.
I've always wondered if he has both of them, frankly.
Oh.
I know, burn. Literally. So my theory is he probably would not want to be second fiddle to anybody, even Donald Trump. So I doubt very seriously that he would ever be a vice president, because he'd have to basically be a yes man for 4 years. And it's just not going to happen. At the same time, if he was going to run for office, he also couldn't do like a big show and, get all of that attention, because he'd presumably be too busy campaigning.
But hasn't Trump shown us that this is just one big show? I mean, you look at the guy, and he's basically doing a comedy shtick that the people are taking as politics, or his base is taking as politics. All he's really doing is going up and saying the most outrageous stuff, and people are going, "Yeah, we love you."
The thing is it might be a big show, but it's the Trump show. It's not anybody else's show. And if anybody else tries to make it their show, then he's gonna stick them in a pair of cement boots and throw him off up here.
Yeah, or claim he was just getting coffee.
Right. Yeah.
But did you see
He was
Peter
using coffee
Thiel's
boy.
quote in The Atlantic? Where he said
No.
voting for Trump was like a not very articulate scream for help. He said it was crazier than I thought. It was more dangerous than I thought. They couldn't get the most basic pieces of government to work, and actually went on in this interview to talk about the fact that he's not giving politicians any more money. He's out. Now he's got himself some legal issues, but still, he's out.
Well, it's smart because I think he said he was going to give like $5 million whenever Masters was running in Arizona, and he ended up spending like $15 million. And so the guy's probably like, he's got his legal issues and he's, running low from all of the political spending before. So it would probably behoove him to maybe sit this one out.
Yeah, it's going to
be maybe the
interesting.
next couple.
But here's the thing, and this is where I think there needs to be a lot made of what Trump has said. It's been reported he's saying that basically if he gets back into government, he gets back into power, he is going to weaponize government against. He's going to do what he's claiming Biden is doing to him. Because, and I love this, he said, what they've done is they've released the genie out of the box. It's actually the bottle, and it's Pandora's box. But never mind, he's getting older. I'm sure he's getting older. It's easy to conflate the two things, but the genie's out of the box.
You remember that time he said that Republicans eat their young instead of eat their own? I still can't get over that. Like, every once in a while, I'm just like, oh, yeah, Republicans, they eat their own,
Yeah.
It's like they eat their young. They're all dead. They're all dead.
If only that were true.
If only that were true. So the thing about Trump is he was already weaponizing so much of government. I mean, especially if you talk to Michael Cohen, talking about all of the crazy things that Donald Trump did to him. He subjected James Comey and Andy McCabe to all of these super invasive IRS audits out of the blue when, they've never been audited in their life and there was absolutely no suspicions they weren't paying their taxes. And in fact, Andy McCabe actually ended up paying over the amount of money that he was paying in his taxes. So the government gave him back some money. They lost money on that deal. Donald Trump has been doing this for a really long time. And the idea that, somehow Biden is doing this is really ridiculous. But again, like every single time Donald Trump points a finger at Biden, you know that it's because it's actually something about him.
Yeah, as my mother always said, when you point your finger at somebody, you got three pointing back at you. And that's Trump on steroids.
It is. And, I think it's clear that, especially whenever he talks about, Biden being too old and sleepy and infirm, that's obviously him because the guy can't get an idiom correct. And he's not doing more than one rally a week. Remember when he was like turning them out like crazy? And now the dude can't get out of bed for,
well, he is busy.
A month.
He is.
That is true. He does have a lot of
busy. I mean, he's busy telling us how smart he is at business, and then him and the kids going into court and going, "Well, we don't know anything about business." And what's amazing to me is, the incredible thing is Ivanka made it to court on Monday. With all of her motherly duties and all of that, she was able to rearrange her schedule and make it to court on Monday. And I know it was a hardship. I know the nanny had to, get some things done right, but she made it.
I know. I was really shocked that she wasn't like wearing one of them on her back and the other one on the front. But she made it. And it seems like a couple of things that she revealed in the trial. One that I found the most shocking, and I probably shouldn't, is that they basically handed over all of their assets to Donald Trump to help pad his net worth because they knew that the Deutsche Bank required him to have a $3 million net worth for him to be able to keep these loans. And so they basically turned over everything that they owned to their father. And that kind of sunk them all, right? Because it showed that they all were complicit in this and they all knew what was going on and they all knew the reason for it. And, I think that's one piece of it that just basically sounds the alarm about, oh God, now you really are guilty and you're screwed. And And the other piece of it is, it seems like the Trump children, the heirs, right, were answering "I don't recall" over and over and over again, right? Well, what I love is that when Ivanka took the stand, every time she said "I don't recall," the AG's office basically said, "We have a document that we'd like to enter into evidence if you'd like to look at it and refresh your memory."
Refresh your memory.
Every single time she used this "I don't recall," there was another document over and over and over again. So all of these documents got entered into evidence that weren't necessarily there before to refresh her memory.
Yeah.
And it ended up working against her.
Yeah. So did she throw him under the bus? Well, is this because a lot of people were saying, she's going to go in there and she's going to cover her own behind and throw him under the bus? Is this what we were expecting, or how would you rate the performance?
I would say she involuntarily threw him under the bus, and it's weird because just based off of the way that she was speaking, it seemed like she was really trying to protect him, and I don't know that she really fully understands what she said and what she admitted to, and how bad it makes them all look. But I feel like she kind of threw everybody under the bus, and she sort of crawled under there with him.
As my grandfather always said, you have the right to remain silent. Use it. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at Raw Story. RawStory.com, the website, if you want to take a look at Sarah's incredible work. I want to talk about Tuesday, the big election. Kind of a blue wave, kind of a big deal. And the abortion issue was front and center. And Republicans are still reeling and trying to figure out how they're going to deal with it. And what I found interesting is you have Mike Huckabee, the former Arkansas governor, coming out and now saying, well, women don't make the abortion decisions themselves. They're pressured into it. They get talked into it by others. And I guess I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's the reason it should be illegal in his mind, but they still haven't figured out that this is an important issue.
It's not only an important issue, but it's an issue that women decide for themselves. And so there's two pieces of this. One, I think people in general don't like it when you take their rights away.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're going to block a right or not approve legalization for marijuana or something like that. But when you take rights away that people have had for generations, it becomes an issue. And so that's one big piece of it. The way that Republicans are talking about women is just so far out of touch and so old-fashioned that it makes them look insane. I mean,
it's like the 50s again, right?
It's like 1850s, some of this stuff. Like this idea that women are suddenly not smart enough to make their own decisions, right? That they're being talked into it. They're influenced by somebody else. It is ridiculous and absurd. But that's the way they've sort of talked about this, and they keep thinking that they can fool people by saying, oh, well, we're going to do 6 weeks, no 9 weeks, no 10 weeks, no 15 weeks. And it's just like, you don't understand. There are women who want to be pregnant, who are having miscarriages and are being forced to go near death because that's the only way that they can, have the dying fetus removed. And there's no built-in mechanism for that in most of the states that Republicans are passing laws. They just don't get it.
Yeah, you made a point a second ago, and I talked about this yesterday, that people like their rights. They don't like them when they're taken away. And I've been talking to my gun nut friends, whom I say, look, because they don't quite get it. They don't understand. This is going to be a big deal for a while. I said, imagine what you would do if they came and wanted to take your gun. This is the same thing. This is how these women feel about you personally having control over their bodies. They don't want it, and they're not going to stand for it.
I mean, the other piece of this is that we as a society are not built for this idea of personhood. We have birth certificates that are issued when you are born, right? We have.
Now you're giving them an idea. We're gonna have conception certificates now because of you.
Well, and that's the thing that's so crazy is now the Congress tried to put in an amendment to the budget where they would ban they would allow people to be fired if they use any kind of contraception or family planning. like across the board.
Jeez.
And so this idea of it's stopping an abortion, a lot of activists have said for a while that this is not about abortion. This is about controlling women, and they're going to start an abortion, then they're coming for your birth control next. And everybody's like, oh, you're hysterical. And it turns out, no, it's actually true, and it happened in Congress this week.
No, look, I'm an old white guy, and I've been saying that for at least a decade now on this show, saying, look, it's about more than just Roe. It's about, Griswold. It's about all of that. It's about control. It's about putting women back in the kitchen, blacks back in the field, and gays back in the closet. That's the agenda. It doesn't get any simpler than that, and they're honest about it to the large extent.
They have gotten more honest about it over time, which I appreciate. I mean, it's just sort of shameless now that they're like, this is what we want. And you mentioned your gun friends. Maybe it's just a matter of we have to sell the gun to the fetus or something like that.
Shooting its way out. Is that what you're telling me?
Right. Kill the host. He's going to kill the host with his little baby machine gun.
Ouch. But we're days away from a government shutdown. I got to get your thoughts on the potential of a government shutdown, because it doesn't appear that our friends in the House have any clue on how to get anything done.
Who thought that getting rid of Kevin McCarthy would not fix all of their problems? I mean, I don't know about you. Who knew? This whole time we thought electing somebody else would just magically make everything okay. And it turns out that no, they're trying to add all of these amendments. I think there was like 100 amendments that they tried to add on to a budget bill. Yep. And finally they just lost so many votes. They were just like, no. So then they tried to do it again, and then it added so many amendments. They were like, no. And so now they left for the weekend for the Armistice Day weekend, and to celebrate the veterans in their district. And now it turns out, I don't know when they're coming back to work or if they're going to do anything or if they care, but we got a week, so get on it.
Finally, I got to get your thoughts on going back to the debate. Evidently there was a dust up between Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, and as I was looking at it, I was waiting for a Chris Rock moment. I was waiting for the Will Smith Chris Rock thing, because evidently Nikki Haley said, "You leave my daughter out of your voice. You're just scum." And I was waiting for a good crack, and the crack didn't come. But someday, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I think the thing that hurts me is that the phrase that she was looking for was "keep my daughter's name out your mouth."
Yeah.
But I like the idea that she called him scum. I like smarmy.
Smarmy's better.
And smarmy, because it goes well with the name. But I don't think that. Here's the thing: Nikki Haley's doing actually pretty well in Iowa, and her polling is doing pretty well. I don't think that most Republicans understand that she's never in a million years going to be elected by all of these crazy right-wing nutters.
Nope.
Because she's a woman and she's not white. And that's just where we are in the Republican Party.
You said it.
It's sad, but never going to happen.
There you go.
But I like watching them fight because it's fun.
So
he puts them in his place.
There you go. Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff.
Thank you. Have a good week, everybody.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Remember, check out her website, rawstory.com. You can check out the work she does there. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that the labor movement lost Philip Murray. Philip was born in Scotland in 1886 to an Irish Catholic family. His father was a coal miner and a union leader. Philip followed his father into the mines at just the age of 10 years old. The father and son made the trip to the Pennsylvania coal fields together when Philip was just 16. They saved enough money and then sent for the rest of their family. One day, Philip got into an altercation with one of his bosses. Not only was he fired, his entire family was kicked out of their company home. From that point on, Philip was dedicated to the union cause as the only hope for working people. He quickly rose through the ranks of the United Mine Workers, becoming vice president by the time he was 33. He worked closely with United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis. During the 1930s, there became a nationwide drive to organize industrial workers. Philip was appointed to lead the Steelworkers Organizing Committee, a key sector for the industrial effort. The Steelworker Campaign met with historic success. They reached a collective bargaining agreement with U.S. Steel, the giant of the industry. Philip went on to become the first president of the United Steelworkers of America, as well as president of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Under his leadership, industrial labor became a powerful force. But that force was checked by the passage of the Anti-Union Taft-Hartley Act in 1947. The anti-communist hysteria of the Red Scare also took its toll on the CIO, forcing Philip to expel some of the most radical unions from the organization. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So evidently Election Day did not go off without a number of hitches. In fact, authorities are now looking into whoever sent suspicious letters to a number of election offices. And this is one of those things where you go, who would do such a thing? Evidently, there were envelopes sent to offices in Georgia, Nevada, California, Oregon, and Washington, and many of them had fentanyl in them. And it's one of those things where you go, why would you do such a thing? And I hope that the FBI and the postal inspectors find them. And then this is one of those things where you go, I hope they don't just find them. This is where you go back to a little old school justice. You go, we're not going to put you in jail. We're going to put you in a room with the election workers. And if you get out, well, then okay, you're fine. Because I don't know what else to do with these wackadoodles. It's just bizarre. Also, to kind of wrap up the hour, and one of those kind of scratch your head moments, evidently Tommy Tuberville, while blocking, some 300-400 military nominees from getting promotions, said that he basically couldn't sit by anymore while the Biden administration injects politics into the military. And I'm going, what? What dumbest guy in the U.S. Senate? What is it you speak of? And look, this is that kind of thing where I go, Republicans just lie a little differently right now. This generation of Republicans just, it's alternative facts. It's alternative reality. And maybe he's just not smart enough to realize that he's playing politics. And I love John Fetterman's response today as Tuberville was doing his thing, which was, any objections anywhere? And basically just mocking this guy. Because at this point, this is mock-worthy. This is someone who should not be in the U.S. Senate. But here we are. And I gotta say, we're less safe because of it. As a country with as much turmoil as there is, this is what we end up with? Is this the best this country's got? I sure hope there's better. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. And make sure you subscribe. Never miss a moment. Back after this.
Authorities are issuing a stern warning for the bushfire season.
Australia braces for El Nino to intensify already dangerous bushfires this year. October 2023 was the hottest October on record. Plus,
look, guys, we're announcing historic investment in America's railroads. I've been talking about this for a long time, I know. Finally, finally we're getting it done.
President Biden unveils nation's largest investment in rail infrastructure in 50 years.
All of those stories and other ones that will be ignored by the mainstream corporate media, straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You know, we may have had a hot summer, but I just went trick-or-treating with my kids, and it was like, you know, the low that evening was 29 degrees.
So climate change is over. Thank God fall is here, Congressman Andy Ogles, Republican from Tennessee. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, don't tell Congressman Ogles about what happened in October. It'll surprise and shock him.
Yes, the Earth just had its hottest October on record by a large margin since record-keeping began in the mid-1800s.
But it was 29 degrees when Andy Ogles went trick-or-treating.
That's according to preliminary data from European forecasters. October 2023 was the 5th month in a row to set a new monthly global heat record, meaning that 2023 is now a lock to finish as the hottest year ever recorded on the planet. Berkeley Earth climate scientist Zeke Housefather warns that we are still pretty early in the current El Nino cycle, and its full climate warming effects are still yet to come. Global temperatures are likely to hit new records in 2024.
Oy.
In Australia, bushfire season is off to a roaring start, with fire crews battling more than 1,000 destructive wildland fires in Queensland over just the last 2 weeks. Ranchers have been urged to sell their cattle herds because the ongoing bushfire emergency is also exacerbating a national feed shortage.
Wow.
On ABC Australia, Emergency Services Minister Stephen Dawson warned residents that El Nino is going to intensify hot and dry conditions in the already massive bushfire season.
Look, there's no doubt that we are we're having a change in climate, and what we're seeing this year is fires that are earlier. They will be more frequent. We will see a long, hot and dry summer.
Here in the U.S., a new report from the Senate Joint Economic Committee calculates that wildfires exacerbated by man-made climate change cost the U.S. between $400 and $900 billion every year. The comprehensive analysis calculated costs from property damage, economic losses, watershed pollution, and other long-term factors. The Senate committee warns the estimates are likely an undercount of the true total cost of wildfires in the United States.
Oh, I hope Congressman Ogles doesn't hear about that.
Speaking of, in politics, the Republican majority in the U.S. House passed a bill along party lines to slash the budget of the Environmental Protection Agency by nearly 40%, gutting funds for state and local water systems and rescinding parts of the Democrats' landmark climate law that help low-income communities address air and water pollution.
Oh, no. Let's pretend that's actually going to be taken up by the Senate, passed there, and signed by the president.
Well, House Republicans know that the pro-fossil fuel bill won't pass in the U.S. Senate, but they pushed it through anyway. One of 12 must-pass spending bills to avert a government shutdown in a little over a week.
Prepare for government shutdown.
Meanwhile, President Biden on Monday announced $16 billion in new investment in rail transit infrastructure repairs and upgrades, the largest since the creation of Amtrak more than 50 years ago. Funding from the infrastructure law will go to 25 projects along the aging critical commuter network of the Northeast Corridor, the busiest rail line in the United States, to reduce traffic congestion and cut air pollution and carbon emissions that drive global warming.
Fully electrified trains on this corridor emit 83% less greenhouse gases, by the way, than driving your car. It matters. It's like taking 500,000 automobiles off the road every day.
And finally, a very big win in Michigan for things that breathe. Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer is expected to sign sweeping climate and environmental legislation passed by the state legislature's Democratic majority. That includes reaching 100% clean electricity by 2040 and funding to boost electric grid stability, prevent blackouts, and lower energy costs for consumers by expanding cheaper renewable energy. The law also includes critical reforms to the clean energy permitting process to counter the coordinated fossil fuel funded anti-renewable disinformation campaign in rural areas of the state that have been working to block farmers and rural governments from installing renewable energy.
Things that breathe?
Yep.
You mean people that breathe.
Everything that breathes.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.brandblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, I just got back from Washington, D.C. this afternoon, and I can tell you all about it. Had a great trip. I went to the Senate Finance Committee. They had me, one tax law expert from NYU, a law professor, two Republican witnesses, but even they seemed relatively sane most of the time. And it went pretty well. I was, of course, on Senator Wyden's side. He's concerned about the buy, borrow, die strategy, where people like are really rich and just withdraw money from their brokerage account and let it go negative and don't actually sell anything. Because the thing is, if you have a lot of stock in your brokerage account, which rich people tend to do, you don't pay taxes based on the money you withdraw. You pay taxes based on the stock you sell. And that might have nothing to do with each other. For most people, they're pretty related. You sell stock, you withdraw the money. For the really rich people, you can withdraw the money and sell the stock the next day, the next year, the next century, or after you die. And so that's what the senators, several of the senators are concerned about, is the fact that people make money from their stock going up. That's great. We're all for that. And they spend the money. That's good too. But they never pay any income taxes on it. And the thing which I had to explain to them is that if you're really rich, you don't need any income. You can just spend money without having any of what we define as income.
And how do you do that? I mean, I've watched some of these videos with the rich dad, poor dad guy who said what you've said. He goes, look, rich people, they don't have income. They don't go to a job. They have passive income. They have portfolio income, but they don't work for a living. They don't go out there swinging a hammer or driving a truck and collecting a paycheck at the end of the week. So how do you, if you've got all these stocks and you haven't realized any of that income, how do you exist?
Well, I'll tell you. Let's say you put $100,000 into Apple years back. Let's say that Apple stock is now worth $1 million. So I've made $900,000 the way most people would think about it. As far as the IRS is concerned, though, I haven't made a penny.
Right.
I haven't sold the Apple stock. But I can withdraw money from my brokerage account. I can withdraw $500,000 from my brokerage account. And as far as they're concerned, I have $1 million in Apple stock, negative $500,000 in cash. It's below zero. So I owe them $500,000, and they're fine with that. And then the interest just keeps accruing. So that a month later, maybe I owe them $501,000, and a month after that, $502,000. But as long as the Apple stock keeps going up in value by more than that, they're fine with that. It works fine.
Yeah.
I never have any quote unquote income because I never actually sell anything. I just withdraw money against it. Kind of like if you could do a cash out refi of a mortgage. You don't sell the house, but you can still get money. So it's kind of like I do a cash out refi of my stock every month. I mean, I don't really do that every month, but in theory I could.
You could, yeah. But now, so you're going to pay interest on that money that you're taking out. Do you get to write that off on your taxes?
Interest. You don't. Well, yes, you do. First of all, you do get to write that off. And secondly, you don't actually pay it. They just increase the amount you owe them every month.
Okay.
So as long as the stock goes up more than the amount that the interest and the amount you withdraw, they're fine with that. It could go on for the rest of your life. And then after you die, then they sell the stock, but your heirs don't pay any income tax on that either because it's a tax-free due to some step-up basis rules. So with all that money I make on the stock, assuming I don't sell it and I eventually die, which most people eventually do, I heard, it's never taxed. Not to me, not to my heirs, not to anybody. It's just never taxable income. And that's the basic thing we were talking about today. And most of the senators who talked about it agree this is kind of ridiculous that we have these rich people who don't pay any taxes. And so Senator Wyden has come up with some proposals to change that, to make people of over $1 billion of assets, which are only a couple thousand people in the whole country, make those people pay taxes on the money they make, whether or not they sell their stock. So I'll tell you, a bunch of the senators came in to talk. Senator Warner suggested that maybe we should charge them tax if they borrow money against it, but not otherwise. A few of the senators spent their entire talking time talking about the customer service of the IRS, and they don't have enough people to answer the phones and things like that. One Republican senator, Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, talked.
Do I want to know this? Do I want to know what crazy Marsha had to say? Yeah, I guess I do.
Okay, I'll tell you. She said that the IRS is doing a poor job auditing people. They went to her state, they audited a bunch of her constituents that came to complain to her, and they even told the constituents they had overpaid their taxes, and they sent them checks. So she thinks that's a sign the IRS is incompetent.
What?
I would suggest maybe if the people getting checks were probably happy about that.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know why they were complaining to their senator that the government was sending them this check.
I got to tell you, I would bet and I'm not a betting person, but I'd bet my last dollar that that's an anecdotal story. That she knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who told a story about that.
Could be. She wasn't under oath. So I don't know. That's how it went. And surprisingly enough, of all the senators, Bill Cassidy was on our side. He was saying he thinks this is ridiculous. And what he said is that these people who do this, well, there was someone was talking about like how many taxpayers there are in the top 1% and the top 1/100th of 1% and stuff. And he says the people who do this strategy, they're not even counted on that list because they don't pay much taxes at all.
Right.
So they wouldn't be in the top 1% for income. And he sounded like he was on our side. I talked later to Senator Wyden's staff. They said they're already on the case of contacting his staff to see if he wants to sign up to help on this. So I think we might have an unexpected ally, Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. One of the highlights was when Elizabeth Warren walked into the room. Kind of everybody, like all of a sudden, this was 2 hours after we'd started, and people were kind of slumping a little bit. But then Elizabeth Warren walked into the room and sat in her seat. And a lot of the senators, they only come when it's their turn to speak. Right. They don't hang around the whole time. Well, I mean, some don't show up at all, but the ones who do show up mostly just come when it's their turn to speak. She came, everyone sort of looked up and sat up straight and looked perky and just you just had this feeling that everyone was looking at her, you know?
Yeah,
and she gave a couple minute speech about how it's ridiculous that billionaires are getting so rich and other people are falling behind. It's so much is unfair. So
we get that. So what's the answer here? I mean, you know, I read some of the stuff. I caught a couple of minutes of the different clips and stuff. So what's the answer here? I mean, you know, we've known this isn't new, Morris. This is stuff that we've talked about before. None of this is new. What's the answer? And is there a path forward? Is Cassidy, being on this side helpful? You got to get to 60 votes in the Senate. You got a crazy Republican House. What's the way forward?
Well, that's a good point. Getting 60 votes, I don't know, but I think we're a lot further ahead than we were when I wrote the Tax the Rich book that explained these same problems.
Right.
Then this was considered a pretty crazy off-the-wall idea when we presented that, when you were in Washington, D.C. at that conference a couple of years back in April.
Yeah.
Now, we have the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee on our side. We have the president of the United States on our side. We have, a bunch of people in the House on our side, not the majority, of course, because it's run by crazy Republicans. But so I think we've moved a lot further. Have we won? No, we haven't won, but a lot of things take time.
Yeah.
The Civil Rights Act took decades through the 50s that, filibustered here, there, and everywhere until, it was during my lifetime when it passed. I think major changes take some time. I think we're getting public opinion on our side. According to Senator Wyden, when he goes to town halls, people are complaining about rich people not paying their taxes. I was kind of surprised at that because he's the only one who's mentioned that, but I'll take his word for it. So I think we're making progress. Is this bill going to pass the House? No. We'd even have trouble in the previous House with the Democrats leading it.
Right.
When Richard Neal was chairman of Ways and Means, he wasn't in favor of raising anybody's taxes,
which is insane to me. But here's the thing, and this is where, as you laid out what you were talking about in the hearing and here a second ago, when you tell that story to average everyday working people, much like, I say, one of the big successes of the UAW strike is that they went out, to the general public and said, hey, look, here's what our members are earning. This is the lifestyle that, that they're making on, $15 some an hour. This is not the gold standard of employment that it used to be. But you've got CEOs who have taken $1 billion in compensation over the last decade. You've got an industry that's made $250 billion in profit off of our labor, and they're not sure. And people responded to that. I think the more you tell that story of, look, you got people who, they're doing well in the game of Wall Street. They're making lots of money. They're paying no taxes on it. That's a huge thing, I think.
I think you're right. I think it's the unfairness aspect that really riles people up and moves public opinion. And that's the point. That's the case that we're making. Like, it doesn't really affect your life whether Elon Musk pays more or less taxes. It might affect his life, but it won't really affect his life either. To tell you the truth, he's so rich.
No.
But it wouldn't really affect you and me at all. But it's just so unfair that some people make so much money and don't pay any tax at all, and other people are struggling to get by.
But what do you say to the argument, Morris, that, it's because they work hard, they're smart, whatever that Horatio Alger kind of mentality is, that they earn it. Elon Musk earns every penny.
Well, sure. But a lot of people are like that. Talk about, a chef opening a restaurant in, Pennsylvania. He works hard. I'll bet he works harder than I ever worked. He takes risks. His restaurant might fail. A lot of them do. His income is uncertain. He doesn't know how much money he's going to make. Hopefully he'll make enough to get by. So that chef is just as deserving of a tax break as Elon Musk is. Maybe even more so, because he already wasn't born as rich as Elon Musk. So I think the same argument applies to almost everybody, or a lot of people anyway.
So last question I've got for you, because again, I think this is one of those things that I think you can run on. I think Biden should be talking about this kind of stuff. I think politicians should be talking about this stuff. This is the meat and potatoes policy stuff that I think is important for people to get behind, instead of this divisive, red hat, blue hat stuff. This is that kitchen table stuff. Do you think this is part of what the Biden strategy is? Do you think you're going to hear more of that from him, or was this just a one-off hearing where we got a couple more people on the side, and we'll see in a couple of elections?
Well, President Biden certainly talks about this. It was part of his budget proposal, and not this exact bill, but a fairly similar bill to say that people have to pay taxes on their capital gains before they sell their stock. So I think it's certainly part of what President Biden is running on. I think there's a problem because some Democrats are afraid. They're afraid of being accused of, oh, you're raising everyone's taxes, from the Republicans, even if they only want to raise taxes of a few thousand of the richest people in the country.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want our taxes raised. They're trying to make middle-class Americans, they're trying to make Americans who work for a living feel like they have more in common with the billionaires than about the people who are working just a little bit harder than they are.
Yeah, no,
and that's what we have to do, is the people that make $20 an hour have more in common with people that make $15 an hour than they do with Elon Musk. And that's what we have to explain to them.
Amen. Good stuff. And you guys are doing great work. I hope folks will check out your website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media. Morris, as always, great talking with you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Great to talk to you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this with your thoughts. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The tax issue is one of those things, not very sexy, not something that gets a lot of attention, but I think extremely important. And when you talk about these issues in those frames, the fairness frame, that is something I think is really important. And when you lay it out like that, you got these rich people who are worth $1 billion, paying a lower tax rate or no taxes, and being one of that Mitt Romney's 47%. Those people who don't pay federal taxes. Now, look, they do pay a lot of state taxes, and they do pay a lot of sales taxes because they consume stuff. But I'll tell you, they figure out how to get around all that. And that's really been how we've created a massive wealth class. And so I was having this conversation today of, using policy in the tax code and how, over decades, the moneyed interests continue to get whatever it is they want, whenever they want it, however they want it, and working people keep getting stiffed. Which is why, again, they keep pushing us at divisive stuff. Who's marrying who's going to what bathroom, stuff that there isn't a solution for. Because they know if we can keep people eating each other, they're not going to focus on the fact that you're getting robbed blind. And look, this is bipartisan, the kind of anger. I said, yesterday, and I got a couple of emails from people who are like, you're comparing the Occupy Wall Street people and the Tea Party. That's not fair to, whichever side they were on. And I said, look, the reality is they were both angry about the same stuff. Rich people are screwing them on both extremes, the right and the left, and in the center. Don't forget them. So for me, there's an opportunity here. I think what Morris and his group are doing with the Great Economy Project is important, getting out into communities and talking to people and explaining this stuff, because it's complicated. It's really complicated when you get down into how it is that Donald Trump avoids paying taxes, how it is that him overinflating his properties benefits him, or underinflating benefits him, or doing both simultaneously benefits him. And who does it hurt? Well, it's a victimless crime, right, Rick? No. Those are dollars that aren't going into the coffers that fund the things that we need: infrastructure, education, healthcare, social safety net programs for our veterans and our homeless, and for our seniors, and for children. All of the things that don't get the funding that we need, being hoarded by a handful. And I go back to, the first Forbes 400 had 2 billionaires on it in today's dollars. 2. We now have, 1,500? And they're not just 1 or 2 billionaires. They're worth hundreds of billions. It's one of those things that, at what point do you then get upset about it and then want to act on it? Now, as I said the other day, when we had a high top marginal tax rate, that wealth was spread a little more equally. Not completely equally, but we had a high tax rate, which meant people didn't want to give money to the government, so they invested in libraries and in schools and in hospitals, paid their workers better. They did all kinds of things. So, for me, that's the part of this that's important. A tax code that doesn't take everybody's wealth, but I got to tell you, gives people the opportunity to get ahead. Let's real quick before the break, get Chad on line 1. Chad, how are you?
Good to talk to you again, Rick. It's been a while.
Yep, quick. I got 2 minutes.
Okay, this thing about Trump not paying his taxes, come on, man. Weren't you watching the big Rachel Maddow reveal show when it showed, she had the big tax scam all lined up, and then she goes on the air to actually show how much he actually paid in taxes. Now, that's the one extreme. Second extreme, I'm a blue-collar guy, and I'll do whatever I can and take advantage of whatever tax loopholes I can to save a dollar.
Chad, I said from the beginning, and I've said all along, Trump did what was legal. The thing is he didn't want anybody to see, one, how little money he does have and where he was getting these things. My problem is not with Trump. My problem is not with the individual billionaires. My problem is with the system that allows them to be able to game the system to where they pay less taxes than you do.
Well, it's fair enough to that point, but if you look at what the actual millionaires or people in that 1%, what they're paying, I believe they're paying about 38 or 40% of the actual federal taxes.
36 is the top rate.
Okay. So
minus all of their deductions and all the other stuff that they do.
Well, sure, but I'm well below them, and I make the same deductions. So again,
no, you don't.
I think it's
no, you don't. No, you don't.
Well,
Trump took most of those tax breaks away for you, and he did. Although that work here that you needed, all of your union dues, all of that stuff, he took that away. But I appreciate. I got to take a break, Chad. I appreciate it.
Take care.
This is worth the minutes. I got to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that the labor movement lost Philip Murray. Philip was born in Scotland in 1886 to an Irish Catholic family. His father was a coal miner and a union leader. Philip followed his father into the mines at just the age of 10 years old. The father and son made the trip to the Pennsylvania coal fields together when Philip was just 16. They saved enough money and then sent for the rest of their family. One day, Philip got into an altercation with one of his bosses. Not only was he fired, his entire family was kicked out of their company home. From that point on, Philip was dedicated to the union cause as the only hope for working people. He quickly rose through the ranks of the United Mine Workers, becoming vice president by the time he was 33. He worked closely with United Mine Workers president John L. Lewis. During the 1930s, there became a nationwide drive to organize industrial workers. Philip was appointed to lead the Steelworkers Organizing Committee, a key sector for the industrial effort. The Steelworker Campaign met with historic success. They reached a collective bargaining agreement with U.S. Steel, the giant of the industry. Philip went on to become the first president of the United Steelworkers of America, as well as president of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Under his leadership, industrial labor became a powerful force. But that force was checked by the passage of the Anti-Union Taft-Hartley Act in 1947. The anti-communist hysteria of the Red Scare also took its toll on the CIO, forcing Philip to expel some of the most radical unions from the organization. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Hear it? What's that sound? Ooh, it's Washington's revolving door, allowing corporate interests to come directly inside Congress to pervert public policy. That door is now spinning fast because there's a new boss operator in Congress. He's Mike Johnson, who was recently unanimously chosen by Republicans to be their Speaker of the House. He's a corporate wet dream, an affable ultra-conservative from Shreveport who consistently backs the plutocratic agenda of big business over workers, the poor, consumers, and most other Americans. Moreover, Johnson maintains it was God who elevated him to his new position of authority, and that the Bible will guide his policy views. Well, selected parts of the Bible. Don't expect much mercy, justice, and peacemaking from this hardcore laissez-faire ideologue. For example, guess who he's chosen to be his director of policy? Big Pharma's top Washington lobbyist. Dan Ziegler has been the chief influence peddler for a dozen multi-billion-dollar drug giants, including Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer. Ziegler has furiously opposed every legislative effort to stop the rampant price gouging, even though 90% of Americans are clamoring for Congress to clamp down on pharmaceutical ripoffs. But we 90%ers don't control the revolving door. Mike does. Johnson piously cloaks himself in both the Christian gospel and libertarian myth of free markets, yet he has consistently pushed government action to restrict competition and protect drug monopolies. Now, in his first substantive action as Speaker, he is literally bringing Big Pharma inside to sit with him in the seat of legislative power. This is Jim Hightower saying drug pricing reform will soon come up for a vote in Congress. Before Mike's lobbyist buddy tells him what to do, let's demand that he reread the Sermon on the Mount.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's an interesting point Chad brings up, and I don't want to completely dismiss his point. But if you look at what's happened over the last 50 years, we've seen a massive redistribution of wealth in this country. And this is one of those things that for me is so clear. We have seen policy happen that has made work pay less, that have created a system where billionaires get tax breaks that working people don't. And I look at Trump's tax law of 2017. Anything that was to go to the middle class, anything that happened, that little bit that we did get, sunsets in a decade. So by 2027, any benefit that you have gotten goes away, and it actually flips and gets worse to where you end up having to pay it back. But corporate tax rates, those are permanent. The tax rates for the very wealthy, those are permanent. And understand when people talk about the golden age of America, everyone go the 1950s and 1960s. Jobs were plentiful. We were paying for our wars. We weren't in debt. We had paid World War II off. We had Korea. We had Vietnam. We were flush. We were investing in an enormous infrastructure. We were making education possible. We gave a generation of white men a whole bunch of money to buy houses and get education and do all kinds of things through the GI Bill. We were doling it out because we were taxing rich people at a much, much higher rate. And the other day we had our friend Mateus Vernengo on, and his example is right. Think of the Gilded Age and all the rich people that you knew of that era. We all know the names: the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilts, the Morgans, the Carnegies. We all know those names. We know the robber barons. Today, there are 1,500 billionaires, so everyone knows one. Everyone knows the name of one. We all know Musk and Bezos and Buffett and Gates and the six Waltons. We all know those names too. But go into the 60s, 1950s, 60s, 70s. Who were those rich people? Who were those robber barons? And he says you can't name them. I mean, there was Howard Hunt, and there may be a couple of names of rich people that you thought of, but they were nowhere near the Gilded Age wealth that we're seeing now and back then. And it has everything to do with the tax code and a redistribution of wealth. And yeah, I'm more than willing to use that word. I used it during the Tea Party uprisings. When people were saying, you wanted to redistribute wealth. I go, yeah, I do. The way it was when my grandparents' generation were working, where you had jobs that could, a single income could support a family, where you had, opportunity to go on to college and not take on a lifetime of debt. You were able to go as far as your talents would take you. But now we're in this Hunger Games scenario where, the wealthy are going, hey, I know there were 10 cookies on the plate and we grabbed 9 of them, and you better look out because that guy over there is going to get your cookie. And I've always said, look, they may have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. There are more of us, and we should be voting. But they're masters of division. Look, I don't blame Trump for taking a tax break that's there. I don't. I blame the fact that there are politicians who put that tax break there. That is the point. It's not, we're always talking about individuals and not about the policy that allows these people to take advantage of this stuff and also redistribute wealth away from work. The fact that we tax work at a higher rate than we tax capital gains is kind of crazy. And I know, we need rich people because they're smart and they know what to do, and they're the job creators, we're told. And I fundamentally disagree with that argument. The job creators are us, the people in every community who have an idea of how they want to live their lives and start a business or the spending that we make in our local communities. It's not some rich guy making choices in a CEO suite. And where I'm frustrated in this moment is I see us divided. But when you talk about these economic issues, when you're talking about how do we get to a point where we're ensuring that look, no kid goes to bed hungry. No veteran goes to bed on the streets. Granny doesn't have to eat cat food. That we have, cutting edge technology and infrastructure. We want to thump our chests and say we're number one. We want to say we're the greatest country in the world. I'm sorry, but having the largest number of billionaires doesn't make us the greatest country in the world. Having wealth distributed into the hands of a few at the cost of the many doesn't make us great. And I say this every time, and I've said this a number of times on the show. I'm sure people have heard this. Look, every time a president takes office, I wish that they are the person who returns reward to work. That they're the folks who, Ronald Reagan once said that, the best anti-poverty program is a job. And I've amended that, saying the best anti-poverty program is a union job, one with living wages, with retirement and health security, with job security, with opportunity. That's the best anti-poverty program. And that's what we should be focusing on. And this is where, again, I go back to Biden. I think he's on the right page in that. And I'm going to keep fighting for that because I think he's right. Now, you go, well, Trump, he said all these things. Yeah. All the things that he said on infrastructure, all the things he said on manufacturing, all the things he said on trade, I am behind. Working people are behind. The problem is it was all talk. The problem is how many infrastructure weeks did we have? 100? I mean, I remember a lot of pictures. I remember a lot of rose garden I remember a lot of ceremony. I remember, shovels and hats. I remember all kinds of stuff. But what I don't remember is him actually building the infrastructure. I remember a lot of talk on trade policy. And to his credit, and I do give him credit for making some reasonable changes to NAFTA. I would have liked to have seen more. But there are some good things that Democrats got put in there as well, along with the labor movement. And the credit I give him is I think he's the only one who could have gotten that done. Because there's no Republican that would have done it. But my problem keeps coming back to this idea that it was all talk. I remember, right after his inauguration, I came on the show and I said, look, if he's serious about that $3 trillion infrastructure package, I'm 100% behind it. If he does that, he's unbeatable for re-election. Because that money is going to filter through every community in this country. That money is going to create jobs all across this country. And all it was talk. Now, here's the other part of this, and I also remember saying this back then as well. It won't be done with prevailing wage. It won't be done with labor protections like we're seeing out of the Biden administration. So when you look at the two from a purely worker issue standpoint, there is no comparison. Joe Biden is the better of the two candidates, without question, hands down. Because everything that he has done, every legislation that they've passed, every investment that they've made has been making communities better, making work rewarded, and helping families build. I think that's important stuff. So when I talk about the tax code, and I have rich guys like Morris Pearl come on, because Morris is probably one of the wealthiest people I know. And he's telling us, hey, the game is rigged. Hey, working people. Hey, stupid, wake up. We're screwing you. And look, does Morris take those deductions? Yeah, of course he does. He'd be stupid not to. And this is the reason that I have Morris on so often, is because I think it's important to hear a rich guy who's worth several $100 million, saying, look, I don't do any work. I sit and I look at numbers. I collect dividends. I'm a rich guy. I should be the target. And I'm advocating for these changes because here's the thing. Here's what he knows. He knows there's a point at which the anger then becomes real and targeted at people like him. And then we end up in a situation like some third world countries where he's going to have to, barricade himself and his family in some encampment to stop from being kidnapped. Nobody wants that. So, when Morris comes on and talks about, hey, we need to tax rich people like me, it's not out of benevolence. It's out of wanting to have a safe society, wanting to have something to pass along to his children, and not wanting to have to barricade himself inside his four walls. Now, is radical self-interest something that we're shocked by? No, of course not. And I've said it before. Look, I would take all those deductions too. Now, on the Trump side, there were a lot of deductions as a working person that I used to take before. Can't do it anymore. Work boots and work clothing and gloves and stuff that you need for work, union dues, any association fees, all that stuff gone. Can't deduct that anymore. I know he gave us a higher personal income deduction that as the years go on erodes. But hey, we got some trinkets up front. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. The Committee for Industrial Organizations was created by 8 unions as part of the American Federation of Labor. United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis was the driving force behind this new committee. His aim was to organize mass production industrial workers as opposed to focusing on those in the skilled trades. While the American Federation of Labor had included some industrial unions, the craft unionists were the dominant force in the organization. The Great Depression had hit industrial workers and their unions hard. Leaders from the heavily affected unions pressed for more support from the AFL. In response, the AFL did authorize organizing drives in the automobile, rubber, and steel industries, but they gave little financial support or effective leadership to those unions. Matters came to a head at the AFL's 1935 convention when mine workers president John L. Lewis punched the president of the Carpenters Union. Afterwards, Lewis called together various industrial union leaders, including Sidney Hillman, head of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, and Harvey Fremming of the Oil Workers Union, to discuss the creation of the CIO. In its statement of purpose, the CIO declared its aim to encourage the AFL to organize by industry. However, the AFL's leadership was not sympathetic to what they saw as an internal rivalry. In 1936, the AFL suspended all of the CIO unions. This led to the industrial union's breakaway from the AFL to form a rival federation. The CIO changed its name to the Congress of Industrial Organizations. By 1938, the CIO had amassed 3 million members. The CIO ran successful organizing drives in auto, mining, meatpacking, and steel. The two union organizations finally remerged in 1955, forming what is known today as the AFL-CIO. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, more information coming out about Clarence Thomas. And again, this is another one of those rich people thing. They've got lots of money. Lots of money. And they dole it out. And it's amazing. I've said before, I've got friends who've served in Congress, and they all tell the same story. No one's ever bought my vote. No one's ever bought my vote. But they get my ear 15 minutes at a time because they've got to go dialing for dollars. And it's amazing how cheap you can get, how cheap you can get your voice heard, a couple $1,000s. And for a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, a billionaire, a couple of grand, not hard. I love what Morris says. When I hand out my business card, it says, Chairman of the Patriotic Millionaire, how many people return my phone call? It's quite amazing. And so I'm looking at this story about Clarence Thomas, who evidently back in 1999, was on the court for about 8 years, wanted an RV, a Prevost Marathon RV, which was worth $267,230 back in 1999. Now, I did the inflation calculator thing over at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's $500,000 in today's dollars. He bought a rolling $500,000 behemoth with somebody else's money. And it was supposed to be a loan, I guess. One of those off-the-book loans. Rich people do a lot of that stuff. Off the books, and now we find out he didn't pay back. Don't worry, we're friends. And what's interesting to me is we're now finding out what I've known for years, because I remember seeing that RV on 60 Minutes going, how's a Supreme Court justice afford that thing? That's a lot of money for a guy who was a public servant throughout his entire career. Never really made the big money that you see Roberts and Alito and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett making. He worked various government jobs. He was the head of the EEOC, which is how he got himself into a little bit of trouble with Anita Hill, and we won't get into that. But I'm going, how does a guy who has been on the government paycheck all these years afford a $267,000 RV just to go tooling around on his vacation? We now know billionaires are taking care of him. And I know, no, you didn't buy his vote. And this is true. I am not alleging that there was a quid pro quo, that I'm giving you this money so that you will vote this way on this issue. I've never said that, and I will never say that. What I am saying is, like my friend said, you didn't buy my vote, but you get my ear 15 minutes at a time. Do you think the guy who lent Clarence Thomas $267,230, do you think Clarence takes his phone call? Do you think when he just wants to wax philosophic, wants to share some insight on the topic of the day, do you think Clarence is going to debate him? Of course not. And this is where you go, you didn't buy his vote, you bought him. And I've said this for the longest time. The Federalist Society, the people that Trump chose his judges from, they groom their people from, I would argue from high school forward, but at least college forward. They do a really good job to where it's not about buying their vote. It's about you already know how they're going to vote before the issue ever comes to them, because you have groomed them throughout the entire process. And you've done it the same way the CIA grooms their assets. We had John Perkins on the program, the guy who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and he walked through this. It's women and money, man. It's the fast high life. It's what billionaires understand. They throw a little cash around and people jump. It's like herding cats. The only way you herd cats is putting food on the table, and then they all come running. So I'm looking at all of this money and this wealth and all of these favors and these vacations and all of this just obnoxious stuff that our Supreme Court justice has gotten himself in. His wife, who's deep into right-wing politics, who is funded by every crazy right-wing billionaire. You go, explain to me why there isn't a hearing on this, but Hunter Biden, we're crazy about. And what I find really funny is evidently James Comer, the guy who's been like the chief, bulldog, the guy who's been all over this, turns out he's got some shady dealings himself. Evidently, he also paid his brother $200,000. We're now finding out all kinds of interesting, fun, and entertaining things. That Comer and his own brother engaged in land swaps. One of the deals involved $200,000. And a shell company. Wow. say it isn't so. And again, what's it saying? If that's not a pot calling the kettle black, that's what this is. But will it matter? And this is where you start going, people in glass houses. Now, I've said from the beginning, if they have a smoking gun where Biden took money from the Chinese government, yeah, we got problems. But there's no smoking gun. There's nothing there. What this is truly the Trump witch hunt. And Trump has already told us, if he is elected president, expect all of this to happen. If he is elected president, expect retribution. Expect payback. Does that scare you? Does it concern you that we're now fully down that road? They've already said their 2025 plan is all about patronage. We're only going to hire true blue loyalists. And they're going to go with Schedule F, and they're going to fire all the government employees, and they're going to bring in, their true blue red hats. Good governance be damned. Getting things done for the American people, not even an afterthought. And as I've said a million times, I want boring bureaucrats running our government. I want people who show up, who have the expertise to do the work that we need to get done so we get the results that we need. I'm not a fan of big government or small government. I want effective government. I want our government to do the things that we individually cannot do. Pave roads, provide health care, educate a populace, do those things, defend the country. But when we got someone running on the platform of retribution, and look, he's talking about a talk show host as his VP. One heartbeat away from the presidency, you're going to have Schmucker Carlson. Are you not concerned for the direction of the country? Are you not concerned that nobody paid attention to the Republican debate? And I love what Ronna McDaniel, who I think is going to go back to Romney. I think very soon Ronna McDaniel is going back to Ronna Romney. Ronna Romney. I think she's going to go back to Ronna Romney. I'll say it once, right? Who would ask, about the infighting, say, well, it's not helpful. Yeah, it's not helpful. But again, we've got real problems that we're not dealing with. And there's literally nobody in the House who's trying. And this is my problem. We're speeding towards a shutdown. Before Thanksgiving, hey, happy Thanksgiving. And with no end in sight. Because you have ideologues who will burn the house down. And look, this is by design because they believe Democrats are going to cave. They believe Democrats are going to give them everything they want. All they have to do is threaten to burn the house down. They've constantly threatened to shoot the hostage, and Democrats have constantly gone, no, don't shoot the hostage. Whatever you want. No, we'll put the gun down. Maybe this time they won't. And what does that mean for us? We elect people to do a job to get results, not to hold us hostage. And I know Republicans are just pining for recession. Could this be part of that? I don't know, but I want to hear your thoughts. Something I said got under your skin, on your nerves, something you agree with me, disagree with me. I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. If you miss any of the podcast, any of the program, grab the podcast. Highly suggest subscribing. As of December 1st, we will no longer be doing terrestrial radio for the foreseeable future. So podcast is where you're going to be able to get us in the future, and we will be doing that as well at the beginning of the new year. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.